So today we are going to be talking about the Renaissance. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so like I talked about last video, Western Europe's going to have the end of the Middle Ages as a result of the Crusades, and it's going to lead to this era that's going to be known as the Renaissance. A lot happier than the Middle Ages, where everyone's just chaotic and being owned by lords and going and fighting and killing people in the name of Christianity. This is a little bit happier, okay? So from about 1300 to 1600, Europe's going to experience this rebirth in trade, learning, and Greco-Roman ideas. And during that Renaissance, people are going to develop new ideas in art, government, and human potential. So this Renaissance is going to mark the beginning of what's known as the modern era. Look at that. We're starting to move up in the world in history. Whoa. So the Crusades increased demand for luxury goods from Asia. People really wanted to buy these nice, expensive items. And then Italian merchants are going to begin meeting the demand for trade in Europe. So people are going to start talking to each other and trading. It's going to be super awesome. Everyone in the world is going to start talking to one another. And this is how we get to the rise of communication. It's just so cool. So as a result, these different Italian cities, since again, they're really focused on trade, are going to begin to form all in Italy. It's going to create this really big, wealthy, middle-class system. So the most important Italian city we're going to talk about is Florence, where wealth from trade is going to spark the Renaissance. And, okay, shameless plug right here, Florence is probably my favorite city I ever visited. It is beautiful. I bought a leather wallet there. That is a beautiful place. The architecture is just gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I love Florence so much. I also almost died from a nut allergy because I was eating some gelato, which is ice cream in Italy, and like I almost died, but it's fine. I'm alive now and teaching world history, so we're good. Okay. But anyways, back to Italy. So a new middle-class system of bankers, merchants, and skilled craftsmen are going to gain a lot of power in Italy. And you're going to have different families that are going to start to spring up. And yes, we are getting to the time of Romeo and Juliet. Best play of all time. Okay? So the Medici family were these wealthy bankers that used their wealth to turn Florence into Italy's most artistic city. That's part of why some of the architecture looks so good. Okay? So kings during this time were able to tax merchants and use their wealth to build armies and strong nations, which are going to really hurt the power of the feudal lords. So you're going to start to see a decline of the feudal lords in these areas. And from about 1337 to 1453, England and France are going to begin this conflict known as the 100 Years' War, where England and France battle it out for over 100 years in a war. Okay? So during this war, this idea of nationalism and being really devoted to your country is going to increase as people are going to become more loyal to their king and nation rather than just being loyal to their lord. Also during the 100 Years' War, different military weapons are going to decrease the power of feudal lords and knights. You also had the discovery of Chinese gunpowder, which led to the development of cannons that helped armies to get into castles. So now people are able to shoot a cannon. That's a lot better than a good old sword, right? So the invention of the longbow is going to allow soldiers to shoot accurately up to about 300 yards, which is going to really decrease the importance of knights on horseback. Okay, so basically, the bow and arrow. So in the late Middle Ages, both the Pope and the Catholic Church are going to lose some of its influence as a result of the Crusades. Again, like I said last video, they're not going to respect them as much. They're going to start to, some people at least are going to start to question their authority. But despite having less influence, the Catholic Church was still a pretty important part of people's lives. And while the Pope wasn't seen as like the only authority on knowledge, he's still seen as really important. So during those Middle Ages, peasants again worked in that manorial system we talked about, right? And you had the rise of trade during the Renaissance, which gave people options to leave the manor and move to cities to serve as merchants or skilled artisans. So now you can move out of being a serf where you're basically in slavery to now you can actually have a job and work in the city as a merchant or in some type of a trade. Okay. So you'd have different things like a master, which would be at the top, then you'd have the journeyman or someone who works for the master, and then you'd have the apprentice. someone who's paid for their training and lives with the master for a few years and is just getting it, like, it's kind of like an internship. So one of the reasons for the decline of the manorial system, not only was it the rise of the Renaissance and people being able to move into these big cities, but you also had one of my favorite topics. We're going to be doing an activity on it on Halloween, known as the plague or the Black Death. And I have got some gruesome pictures. I'll show you in class probably, but I might show you a few interesting ones on this video. So part of how the plague was spread, so you have rats. Rats were the main cause. They were infected with this plague bacteria, and then they'd get a flea on it which would bite the rat, and through the rat's blood the bacteria would be contracted, and then that bacteria would multiply, and it would get, the fleas would get their guts full of the plague bacteria, and then the flea would bite a human. So basically it goes from rat to flea to human, and it would spit blood into the wound when it bit it, and it would make humans infected. So in 1347, this is going to all start when a ship is going to arrive in Italy containing these plague-infested rats. And the plague's going to really spread quickly throughout Europe along these trade routes. I mean, the plague is nasty, y'all. It's gross. So again, here's just a couple pictures. Some of the symptoms of it, you'd have a fever and a headache. Then you get some swelling. Some of those places that's starting to swell would start to like ooze some good old pus and bleeding and blah, gross. You also have nausea and vomiting, and you just have like a lot of achy feeling. It's kind of like the flu from what I've gathered, but with good old like bumps that ooze. Pretty nasty stuff. So some different attempted cures for the plague. One, they said you can just pray it away. One said you could bathe in urine. One said isolation. Maybe you could try some leeches, put some good old leeches to, you know, suck up that blood. Or maybe place some dead animals in your house. You know, that'll really solve it. Just put an old dead animal in your house. That will solve all your problems. So this plague is going to kill 25 million people in 5 years. And that was a third of Europe's population. So if you are alive and you're descended from someone from Western Europe, your family was very lucky because your family survived the plague. Whoa, how cool. So the plague is going to cause a labor shortage, and those that actually survived could demand higher wages and more rights because, again, there weren't people to work the job. They just needed people, so you could ask for more money. So I guess if you lived, you could at least make some money. You know, not the worst. And these individuals are going to become the center of attention during the Renaissance because, again, people are now starting to think for themselves for the first time. So social status was based on wealth and ability, not necessarily by birthright. It was about how intelligent you were, not from who you were born to. So anyone could be at that level, but you had to have a lot of ability. You had to really try, or you had to have a lot of money. So one of the new ways to start thinking for yourself became this idea known as humanism. And these humanists are going to study classical ideas of Greece and Rome and believe that education could make the world a better place. Look at that. Look how cool education is. Whoa. So for men and women in the Renaissance, for men, the ideal man was someone who's well educated, was smart, can dance, write poetry, and play music, also known as a Renaissance man. Then you had the ideal woman, which should have the same qualities as men, but they can't seek fame or political power. Hillary Clinton would not work for the ideal woman in the Renaissance. But they were better educated than in the past. But they did have, and they had fewer rights though than medieval women. People in the Middle Ages had a little bit more rights than the Renaissance, but you know, we had it going for us. You just can't be famous or a politician. No, women didn't have rights. So, with the Middle Ages, again, when you had that decline of feudalism, people were really more devoted to God and used that feudalism to maintain order. But once you had the rise of the Renaissance, you had this rebirth of classical learning and a new belief in human potential and really thinking about how can humans think better? How can we start to learn from our mistakes? And that's all I have for you guys on the Renaissance. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!